NPDA debate at the first ever HBCU national tournament. At this time, we're going to recognize our finalists. Will the team from Howard please stand up? Team from Howard, Ariel Adams and Michael James Franklin. Next, we're going to introduce our team from Prairie View, which is Antonio Brown and Urban Bryant. A few announcements, if you could just make sure your cell phones are silenced or put on Do Not Disturb. Please keep all sidebar communication to a minimum, 1 for the debaters and 2 because they're also filming in here. And teams, the judges decided that y'all keep your own time, if that's okay. Okay. Are there any paradigm questions or questions about NPDA in general?
Just, is it possible that you all could just kind of state your paradigms or preferences for debate before we begin?
My thing is, I'm really big on impact. So I prefer impact calculus, I prefer real world impact. I also prefer if you stick to the flow. With getting certain jobs, I will circle and I will know. And if you state values, definitions, counter values, counter definitions, stick to those and just like prove to me why I should press that one. Any other questions?
Right, so I've seen a couple of different ways of the judges, for a point of clarification for a question, exactly how are we gonna make sure we handle that?
For me, point of clarifications are between y'all, because that's between y'all. Point of orders, will be directed to us. We'll make sure if anybody has a point of order, you stop time. We will then deliberate point of order. Most likely, I'm not going to ask somebody else about point of order. And then we'll make sure time goes in.
All right, and then lastly, just so stand for a point of clarification.
I honestly don't care, but it's between y'all. Like, it's how they do it. Yeah, we don't care. I don't know if the camera will be able to see you. Don't care about your chart out your mouth. Okay. Anything else?
Oh, I do have a question. Do you want us to stand in the middle, or do you want to do the stand first, just so we have to rest our hands?
I also don't care where you stand. I usually just find that way first. All right, let's go ahead and get started.
Right, is there anyone not ready? As to an early start, we'd like to start by thanking the amazing tournament for the inaugural HBCU Speech and Debate Championships, along with our opponents for this amazing and bomb intellectual conversation we're about to have. We want to thank the judges for being here, and we want to thank everyone. Let's get to this debate, y'all. Now, resolved, this House believes this war on drugs should be left in 2017. Our theme of our case is that anything that disproportionately affects Black people or marginalized communities should be left in 2017. Now, we vehemently affirm this affirmation, and we're going to have a few contentions. But before we get to those, we're going to first define a key term. We define the war on drugs as according to the Drug Policy Alliance as a dramatic increase in the criminalization of drugs, along with changes in sentencing and the militarization of combating the war on drugs. Now, to move, before we get into our first point, we would also like to start with a quote from one of Richard Nixon's top aides, John Ehrlichman. He states specifically that the Nixon campaign had two enemies, They had anti-war left, and they had black people. And you can't criminalize people for their political beliefs specifically, and you cannot criminalize people for simply being black. So what we did, and so what ended up happening is they decided to push drugs into these communities in order to disrupt these communities so they couldn't have the political impact that they deserve. Now that this is the basis of the war on drugs, we're going to get to our first contention, that the war on drugs has substantially inflated the imprisonment of black people. For starters, we have to first touch on mandatory minimum sentencing, how the increase in mandatory minimums not only created sentencing that disproportionately affected African American communities, but it also disproportionately affected nonviolent criminals and their ability to serve within the prison system. Specifically, we also want to touch on this difference of sentencing from Ava DuVernay's 13th documentary, when she provides the evidence that showcases that when individuals in black neighborhoods have higher sentencing rates for the drugs that would be popular in black neighborhoods compared to suburban and white neighborhoods. And when you have these lower standards of punishment, not only did it create something that ended up disrupting the generations, and not even one generation, but generations of black people, this showcases a very significant and substantial problem. What this ends up doing is that it ends up providing not only a severe lack of ability for convenient political organization, but it's something that disproportionately affects black people in its entirety. Also, next, when it comes towards our second contention, is that the war on drugs has not worked. Specifically, is that it substantially failed in stopping the influx of drugs within the United States. Specifically, want to focus on how they focus on punishment over rehabilitation. In the war on drugs, rather than attempting to rehabilitate individuals, rather than trying to help people overcome the drug addiction, they instead choose to punish them and try and leave them for dust and try and forget about them. And when you have this type of ideology, not only is it negative and it ends up ruining the foundation for individuals, but this is something that ends up being incredibly problematic for groups of people who truly have a problem with drug addiction. When you're leaving people behind like this is a policy that's not supporting all Americans. This is not supporting individuals' fundamental rights. Secondly, it's also important to notice that there is no focus on demand in the war on drugs. They simply try to combat the supply rather than combating the demand on drugs. If there was actually successful rehabilitation sessions and the actual focus on trying to help individuals overcome and lack the demand for having drugs, then the war on drugs would have had the ability to be successful. However, this war on drugs that was initiated by Richard Nixon needs to be left in 2017. Next, we also want to lead towards the third contention. Specifically, we want to focus on the inherent criminalization and the dehumanization and the dehumanizing systems that come from the war on drugs, whether it be the dehumanizing prison systems or whether it be the dehumanizing forces that have been utilized, whether it be the creation of the Department of Homeland Security that has been utilized, specifically ICE, Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement. They have been utilized in a dehumanizing manner to not only affect people when it comes to the war on drugs, but they've also been utilized in terms of crafting horrid prison conditions. For example, you have Joe Arpaio in Arizona, the former sheriff, who not only ran what he deemed as concentration camps for individuals, but he substantially failed in being able to provide humane conditions for individuals who are prisoners. And by having these types of crackdowns, not only was it inherently problematic, but it also showcases that this war on drugs was just not beneficial. And overall, all we have to say is that the war on drugs is something that must be left in 2017 because we don't support the marginalization of black people or any marginalized groups of people.
The opportunity is to give a speech not to exceed 8 minutes, starting now. Of course, much like our opponents, we're very pleased to be in the presence of this illustrious event. It's the first HBCU national tournament. We are very excited. We thank you, judges, for your time and attention. Thank you, opponents. You've done a fantastic job. Congratulations on making it to the final round. Thank you, audience. It's so great to have some people to speak to, some more people to speak to, in fact. And we pray that you lend us your ear as we give some insight and some nuance to this debate about the war on drugs. Because the negative, we want to make very clear from the very beginning, does not endorse the idea of oppressing any particular marginalized race or minority group. That would be unrighteous, unfair, unjust, un-American. We do not do that. We're going to put into the debate the weighing mechanism of societal welfare. So, Judge, whoever opposed the main mechanism of societal welfare the best, especially for Americans, because we're considering the war on drugs, which is an American initiative, then and only then should that side win the debate. Our first contention is that there is a geopolitical variable that is ignored by the government in today's round. There are three particular subpoints. I'm going to talk about the war on drugs in Mexico, the war on drugs in the Middle East, and then the fact that the war on drugs is, of course, not only a domestic effort. Firstly, in Mexico, there are two particular cities that are overrun by drug cartels. That would be Juarez and Nuevo Laredo, which is both of them in particular are on the American border. Now, why are they on the American border? Because it has a proximity that they can move drugs into the U.S. where they are most profitable. The war on drugs is protecting you and I, especially in this very great state of Texas, from the threat of drug cartels, from their abuse of human beings, their trafficking of human beings, and, of course, particularly the drugs that they would bring into the country. Let's get a little more specific. CNN in 2009 stated that this a particular cartel, this paramilitary cartel, Los Zetas, are like essentially Green Berets on the other side of the border that are trafficking people, that are trafficking drugs, that are moving illegal immigration into our country, and it's only by the war on drugs that we deter their advancement to crossing over the border. Let's move across the globe to the Middle East. The Taliban, according to The Guardian, in 2012, made $65 million exclusively off the sale of marijuana. We combat them day to day. To this very day, we are fighting the Taliban. Why? So they cannot fund their operations via their drugs. We are taking the war on drugs across the world, and this is justified. This idea is substantiated by Ronald Reagan declaring the war on drugs a threat to, quote, national security. This is a national security threat. So all of our efforts to defend our homeland that are related to drugs are an extension of the war on drugs. When we take war on a noun in the same way we take the war on terrorism, we fight it domestically and, of course, on the international stage. I'll take the first 2 questions.
So, since the implementation of the war on drugs, there has been a substantial decrease in human trafficking within the United States.
So, the war on drugs does not directly impact, there's no statistic that we have, right, to prove that kind of thing. So the fact of the matter is that these cartels are directly limited. If you want to give a specific instance where they affected in cartels' ability to impact the United States, the DEA killed Pablo Escobar and dismantled the Medellin cartel in Colombia. This is an act directly related to and directly following Reagan's declaration of the war on drugs. This is definitely a hard fight. It's definitely a war, and just like our war in the Middle East, there's not a lot of concrete evidence of our yields from it. But if we were to cease, if we were to stop our efforts, we would see the exact devastation that initiated the war on drugs, the same way we would see the exact devastation that initiated the war on terror. Attacks like 9/11. We continually fight in order to protect ourselves from the imminent threat, right? We have not seen a 9/11 scale attack because we continue our war on terror. If we were to stop our war on drugs, the cartels would come directly to us. Second, legalizing is not the solution. First, the CDC reported that there has been a 400% increase in the overdoses due to opioids since 1999. From 1999 to 2010, a 400% increase of overdoses due to opiates. The harms of the drug problem, the harms of the war on drugs are not specifically related to those that are legal drugs. They are related to prescription drugs as well. The Washington Post in August of 2017 writes that the legalization of marijuana, the changing of these particular policies, doesn't really help black and brown people. The fact of the matter is, black and brown people who are disproportionately incarcerated, when they exit prison in states like California and Colorado that have legalized marijuana in its recreational use, recreational sale, they cannot actually apply for a license to have a dispensary. They cannot sell it legally. So what do? They sell it on the street. If they are caught selling it, they will then be institutionalized again, and the cycle repeats itself. Judge, if we can simply end the war on drugs without changing the minutia of these policies, the harms will continue, and the government will not access their advantages. Point 3, our counter plan is simply to change the strategy. Take away our domestic efforts of the war on drugs and keep it foreign. It is foolish to fight a war in your own borders. Fighting the war on drugs in places like Colombia, in places like Mexico, in places like Afghanistan is the only way that we can protect ourselves from from these particular harms. Fighting the war on drugs domestically against black and brown people like the people in this room, that is where we find the harm. So ending the war on drugs, foolish. Modifying the war on drugs is where we access all the advantages and cease the harms that are presented by the affirmative in today's round. Now I'll move on to address the arguments. I'll be doing my best to move down the flow, judges, and make sure I address everything. So essentially, there is a theme. And the theme I addressed at the beginning of my speech. It's very simple, that the government does not believe in anything that is racist. All the racism should be left in 2017. We concur. Racism should be left. The domestic aspect of the war on drugs should be left. We can end that. But in the negative world, we have to continue the war on drugs in the foreign theater so we can protect our borders, protect people like you and I from terrorism, from cartels, and the imminent threat that they pose. Excuse me. That we had from the first contention, it was stated, let me move to the second contention. I'll try to keep it brief and come back to that, judges. I want to make sure I'm very clear with my arguments. So, the second contention is that the war on drugs simply doesn't work. Of course, this doesn't take into account the international factor. I just mentioned Pablo Escobar was murdered, the Medellin cartel was dismantled by the DEA. Slow process, we only have so many victories to claim, but the fact that you and I are protected here, the fact that the state of Texas has not been in these cartels is evidence that we are protecting ourselves. Our opponents in the third contention state that the creation of the Department of Homeland Security and the implementation of ICE raids is an extension of the war on drugs. This is simply untrue, Judge. The Department of Homeland Security was founded after 9/11, after the terrorism that was funded by marijuana sale attackers, right? But of course, with the war on drugs, we continue to protect ourselves from these assailants and these particular impacts. Now, let's go back to the idea that black people are being disproportionately, in their first contention, disproportionately incarcerated. We can solve these under the negative counterclaim. If we propose the counterclaim of ending a war on drugs domestically, then we'll stop affecting black and brown people and, of course, protect ourselves from foreign threats. As my time winds down, I'm going to have to pass on that question and urge you to vote a negative ballot. Thank you.
Is everyone ready? So before I begin, I also want to extend a blanket of gratitude to everyone participating in today's debate. I want to thank the audience as well as the judges and our opponents for being here to be engaged in this intellectual debate. And without further ado, I will begin. So resolve. This House believes that the war on drugs should be left in 2017. We stand in affirmation of the resolution for two reasons, which my partner has stated, and I will bring up later. First, I will address some of the claims that my opponents have made. So they said that their contention is that the war on drugs is in the best interest of societal welfare. They also talked about geopolitical variables such as Mexico and the Middle East, and how there were $65 million made off of the sale of marijuana. So first, I want to talk about what's in the best interest of societal welfare. Our society consists of marginalized groups as well as those who enforce the war on drugs. So we need to understand that as long as that is the case, then the war on drugs is attacking those black and brown bodies that are in those marginalized groups. We also need to understand that the war on drugs, as much as they talk about Mexico and the Middle East, they focus primarily on Richard Nixon's institution. They provided no support of a policy implemented in those areas. They also talked about how the DEA killed Pablo Escobar. Again, that is a brown body that was taken away because of the war on drugs. They also said and I quote, there's not a lot of concrete evidence to support the claims that they're making in today's case, and I would hope that you would take that into consideration. Now, they also brought up the war on terror. Now, the war on terror is also another effort to attack black and brown bodies. That is a war and an attack on people who are of Islamic faith. They talked about the 400% increase on opioids, but they didn't understand that the war on drugs focused on crack and powder cocaine. Now, according to the according to the Sentencing Project, in 1999, 57.6% of offenders were black. In In 2000, 57.9% of offenders were black. In 2001, 56.8% of offenders were black. So when we're discussing the war on drugs, we're saying that this is a war on black bodies. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get back into our theme, which is that the war on drugs disproportionately affects black people, and anything that disproportionately and negatively affects marginalized groups should be left in 2017. So the war on drugs has substantially inflated imprisonment of black people, which I've already provided statistics for. The war on drugs was not successful in hampering the drug trade in any way, and if my opponents can bring up some type of evidence for that, then I encourage you to cast a ballot cast a negative ballot. Now, according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, there were nearly 2 million state and local arrests for drug abuse. And that goes into the 1999, 2000, and 2001 percentage of black people who were offenders. And so we have a system in place that protects, offends black and brown bodies, but protects white rapists and terrorists like Brock Turner and the Las Vegas shooter, and declare them mentally ill, but they don't provide rehabilitation for people who are suffering from drug abuse. These are, again, black and brown bodies. This is the HBCU National Speech and Debate Championship. The opposition is basically stating that it is okay to attack people who are in this culture of this HBCU. Now, we need to know that my partner did bring up rehabilitation. Now, drugs were put into these underprivileged neighborhoods. They were pushed into these societies where these communities were essentially flourishing in the beginning. Now, how can we go from flourishing to a downward spiral of drug abuse and selling drugs and becoming imprisoned at a disproportionate rate and not receiving some type of rehabilitation for nonviolent crime? We have to really consider the context of the war on drugs. Again, my opposition has already stated that, quoted Richard Nixon's institutions, but has provided evidence from foreign nations. I need my opposition to give me some type of backing for the institution he's put in place, or to at least give me some type of policy from the nations that he's given critical acclaim to. And with that, I yield my time to the chair.
Member of the opposition to give a speech not to exceed 8 minutes. I want to give a brief blanket thanks to the judges, to my opponents, to our partner, to the audience for being here. Let's get into this debate. So, Judge, what I'm going to do is first go on to the new arguments presented by the affirmative, and then I'll go to the rebuttals presented on our case by the affirmative, and then I will go to the negative case. They continue to put out facts stating the war on drugs is racist, going again and again about how this unfortunately affects black and brown people. We want to make sure it's clear and crystal in the negatives world, we are not allowing that to continue. We said again, and I'll go back to what we stated. We want to change the way the war on drugs is done. We want to change the domestic part of the war on drugs. The domestic part, which is putting black and brown bodies in prison, we want to change that. But the foreign part of the war on drugs is just as important, because 9/11 happened because of Taliban people being able to sell drugs and then coming over here and killing us, killing black and brown bodies. Black and brown people worked at the World Trade Center, and they also died. There's a geopolitical problem here. There are black and brown bodies that also live on the border. They're also affected by the Mexican cartel. I'll leave one of three questions.
Do you know the number of black or brown people who were affected by this?
So again, we'll go back to the ideal that if there is societal impact, if anyone dies, that is a problem. So let's go back to the ideal that terrorist activities are huge catalytic events that change what we do in our day-to-day lives. We cannot allow terrorists to continue to operate. And let's go again to what the negative says. In our case, we do not want to keep lowering black and brown bodies into prison. In our case, we do not want to continue to marginalize black and brown people or throw them in prisons at higher rates. That is not what we want to do. We want to keep the foreign part of the war on drugs. Let's continue now with their new arguments.
So would you say that international countries like Colombia have been positively affected by the war on drugs internationally?
Okay, so continue, we'll go back into that when I go back onto our case. When I go back onto their case, they say that the war on terror is only trying to attack brown bodies. That is not what the war on terror is. The war on terror is a war against terrorism, against people who are practicing Islamic faith and who are using it, who are twisting the Islamic faith to push wrong ideals to dupe people into doing things that you have no business doing. I know this because I was there, I fought there. We fought with also Afghans who were Islamic also. So we're not just attacking brown bodies, we are together in a coalition. NATO is a bunch of different countries together fighting against everybody who wants to do harm to us, who don't care if you're black, brown, or white, they are just terrorists. So let's go back to the rebuttal to the negative gave to our case. They talk about social welfare, they talk about, again, that the war on drugs is wrong. Any idea of society welfare? We want to do what is best for society. Making sure that we do not have terrorist activities is what is best for society. And we also solve for their advantages. We make sure in our case to end the domestic part of the war on drugs. I'll continue now. They said there's no policy. They said there was no policies put into place in these areas where the war on drugs took place that affected them positively. I also understand one thing. Pablo Escobar, just because he's cool and rap people like to quote him, was not a good guy. He blew up a whole plane. He killed innocent people in an effort to keep his power in that country.
So, do you agree that the war on drugs in its capacity in 2017 should be left in 2017?
So again, the question we said, what we said is that we're going to change the war on drugs, change the domestic part of it, but the foreign part that is still going on right now must continue. So back to the policy that we said that was put in place. Pablo Escobar, again, not a nice person. They put a policy into place to make sure to deter, to stop what he was doing, to save the innocent Colombian people's lives who lived there. In Mexico, we started to move in DA agents to stop the violence that's going on. There are so many people flooding into the United States because they can't live in their homes because drug cartels have taken over. I'll continue now. Like I said, the war on terror is not just a war on Islamic people. Going back to our first contingent, this is a geopolitical conversation. There are two parts of the war on drugs. It is domestic and it is foreign. In the definition that we gave for war on drugs by Reagan, he said the threat of drugs is a threat to security, to national security. This also ties into their definition when they talk about the militarization of the war on drugs. The militarization of the war on drugs happened because people were using drugs to threaten our national security. This is a geopolitical issue. We have not only the Taliban, Hezbollah, ISIS, other insurgent groups in places like Djibouti and Nigeria using their access to drugs to fund their activities to hurt everybody, not just to hurt everybody in that area. And contention number two, that legalization is not the solution. As we brought up, in Colorado and California, when they legalized drugs, there's still an issue that black and brown bodies that already went to prison for this cannot participate in this new system because they have a felony on their record and they're not allowed to then get a license to sell drugs legally. So they go back into the system because they go back onto the street. They haven't solved for this harm. Let's go continue going down. We talked about the CDC said in 1999 there was a 400% increase of people who overdose on legal drugs. So it shows that legal drugs are just as much a problem as illegal drugs. If we cannot figure out how to solve legal drugs, how are we going to solve them when we turn illegal drugs to legal drugs? Again, our counter plan, real quickly, we want to first first change the scheduling of marijuana. It should not be a Schedule I drug. We're going to change the schedule of marijuana. We want to change the federal laws or the state laws that keep black and brown people, men and women who have gotten felonies and keeps them from participating in the system. We want to change that, but we must keep the foreign part of the war on drugs because it keeps us safe here today. Again, to our weighing mechanism that we gave societal welfare. When we talk about societal welfare, what is best for society. The war on drugs, the domestic part of it keeps us safe. It keeps cartels from Mexico coming in to Texas and starting to kill an American citizen, and it keeps people from like the Taliban and other groups like that from coming over here and committing horrendous acts of terrorism. I yield the rest of my time to the floor.
The leader of the opposition to give a speech not to exceed 4 minutes. Everybody join? Fantastic. So this is the last speech of the opposition, and the last speech, or negative speech of the tournament. I really cannot express how happy and how much joy this fills me to be here with you all, to lay my eyes on all of you and to compete with you at this particularly high level of debate. Thank you. We've expressed a lot of thank yous though, and so judges, I'm going to get down to the voters. These are concrete reasons why you can feel comfortable voting for the negative in the round, because all in all, there is no reason with the amount of risk, the amount of negative impacts you incur by leaving the drug war behind, you cannot responsibly vote for the affirmative. I'm going to give you a couple of different observations. Firstly, it's apparent in this round, Judge, that according to the theme, according to the contentions, the particular citations, and the question given by the affirmative, that is a play on identity politics. Judge, do not buy this. We are simply seeking to protect black and brown people, to save black and brown people, without considering the whole security, the whole sanctity of life, the value of life, the existence of life of all of Americans. If black and brown people are affected disproportionately, we can't solve for that. We do care. This is important. We've stated this throughout the case. We want to solve for the harms that are coming against people who look like you and me, but America as a whole, if my neighbor, white, Mexican, Japanese, whatever, is in danger, so am I. We need to protect the United States as a whole. Judge, they are throwing the baby out with the bathwater. The whole of the war on drugs is not bad, simply aspects of it, and these aspects have been changed in certain places. They have not been changed enough. We want to continue these changes. That means continuing the lobbying against scheduling marijuana as a schedule, continue the legalization of marijuana for recreational use, and with these policies that we presented that have gone unopposed by the affirmative, you should be voting for the negative. So the first voter, we're going to permutate or draw into our claim the idea that we should be rehabilitated. We can do that in the negative world. That we should be legalizing. We can do that in the negative world. These are arguments that were presented in the second constructive speech by the affirmative. We are going to go ahead and do those things. Those are part of our counterclaim. Moving on to the counterclaim, our second contention is that our counterclaim was dropped. In that second affirmative speech, there were no arguments brought up against directly our counterclaim to say that our counterclaim doesn't solve. Our counterclaim solves for all those harms that are coming against black people. Again, domestically, the war on drugs has done terrible harm against your family, my family, people who look just like you and me. So, we're going to stop those things, solve those harms. This has been cold conceded in the case, Judge. That alone should be a vote, a ballot in favor of the negative. They cannot bring this up in a later speech. That would be a new argument. In the last speech, simply unfair. We don't have any time or room to reply to that kind of argument. And lastly, the impacts, Judge. The impact of ending the war on drugs yesterday, right? Last year, in December 31st, 2017. As of that time, we would end our campaigns against the Taliban who are producing marijuana. We would end our campaigns against cartels like the Medellin, like Los Zetas. We would leave cities like Fort Bliss, that is on the border next to Juarez. We would leave cities like Laredo, which is next to Nuevo Laredo, perfectly open, perfectly vulnerable to the influence, to the violence, to the carnage, to the depravity that these cartels bring. These are paramilitary cartels who have taken over Mexican cities. The Mexican government is, in fact, fighting them with military operations. It has been militarized. According to the definition given by the affirmative, according to the drug policy lines, this is from the affirmative, the war on drugs is the, quote, militarization of drug policy. We need to continue the militarization and just not wage war on our own people. That is foolish. The counterclaim solves for all the harms that's been co-conceived around for all of these recent judges. Do not throw out the baby out with the bathwater. Please vote negative for the security of our country. Thank you. And I give the rest of my time to the floor.
Is there anyone not ready? Then let's begin. I'd like to once again extend my blanket of thanks to everyone for their participation in this round. I want to thank all the dignitaries. I want to thank everyone for this amazing experience. But let's get into the meat of this debate. At the end of this round, there are going to be a few core reasons for why you end up voting for the affirmative team. First, one of their main voters is the risking of international impacts, yet they ignore the impacts that are already happening domestically towards Black and brown bodies. They ignore the dehumanization contention from the first affirmative speech that talks about the dehumanizing efforts that happen when it comes to the war on drugs. While they state within their counterplan that they would end these efforts, however, their specifics of their counterplan by changing the scheduling of marijuana and by legalizing marijuana contradicts with their point of saying legalization doesn't work in one of their initial constructives. But also, by just legalizing and changing the scheduling of marijuana as a drug will not help change the lives of those who have already been convicted. They aren't saying they will expunge felonies from individuals' records. They aren't saying they will make adequate difference towards individuals who are addicted to drugs right now. They aren't saying they're going to help build rehabbing institutions. They're not saying they're going to combat the demands for drugs that are going on right now. When they refuse to focus on these aspects, this showcases a significant problem, a significant deficit within their counterplan. They still leave a complete burden of a multitude of domestic problems going on that they'll be unable to solve for.
Point of order. What's up, man? So that would be a new argument, about, so like all those, especially counterclaim, particularly that of like, that we didn't expunge those records of the felony charges. So I think we should have really been around.
And next, specifically in touching on their war on terror aspect as well, they've continuously attempted to conflate the war on terror with the war on drugs, and this has ended up leading to disinformation within today's debate round. The war on terror is not a part of the resolution that this House believes the war on drugs should be left in 2017. Also, it's important to touch on, they continuously speak of the success of the war on drugs internationally, yet they were not able to answer the question about Colombia when I asked the point of information towards them. Also, they were not able to showcase, they gave an example of Mexico being suffering through significant problems right now with the military fighting against cartels in Mexico. If the international war on drugs was having that much success, then there wouldn't be these combating issues happening right now. Also, they mentioned the opioid addiction, the opioid problems happening within the United States. If the war on drugs internationally was successful, then we would not be seeing these drugs being funneled into the United States right now. When they're providing these points saying that internationally the war on drugs is having success, it's showcased by the fact that we have still significant domestic problems here in the United States. Next, they also, when we go to their overarching value of societal welfare, it's important to understand that societal welfare is going to only be provided by the affirmative side by leaving the war on drugs in 2017. Because if they continue this international war on drugs, not only will it not solve for issues that are happening domestically with individuals, but by continuing this international war on drugs, we're going to continue to have countries put in bad position. Once again, like the lack of answering about the condition that Colombia is in right now is very significant in ignoring the dehumanizing aspects, the dehumanizing environment that individuals are going through right now with the war on drugs' international effect. When you're ignoring that effect and trying to deem the international war on drugs as a success, you're effectively erasing these individuals' suffering. You're effectively erasing their struggles, and that's not going to flow towards affecting positively societal welfare. Rather, it's going to only further impact marginalized communities. Also, next, they want to change the war on drugs, but they agree that the war on drugs at the end of 2017 should be left in 2017. They offer this counter plan that, as we had stated with the deficit, is going to be inadequate in being able to solve. Next, they say, also, so they make this argument about identity politics that I found to be very interesting. So they say that identity politics ignores security, but we're ignoring the security of black and brown bodies that have been inhumanely imprisoned. We're ignoring the black and brown bodies that have been just completely disrupted and destroyed for mandatory minimum. We're just playing identity.
All right. So the argument that the war on drugs should be left as it existed, right? The argument that us changing it would be still leaving it. That's a new argument. It was brought up as a question, and in the second negative constructive, but this is the first time it's mentioned as a rebuttal, as an argument if you flow, and so that's the argument that it would be something new that we would be able to come back.
All right. And next, it's also important to identify that, like, you can't say that we're playing games with identity politics over security when so many people have been have been dealt with substantial insecurity with the way the war on drugs has affected people, internationally and domestically. Next, it's also important to note the contradiction of Bill reaffirming in their first speech that legalization will not work, but then that ends up becoming one of the points of their counterclaim that they brought up in their first rebuttal. So either legalization does not work or legalization will work. They have a contradiction on the flow right there, and that's just another reason why you wouldn't want to trust that counterclaim. You would only want to affirm the resolution of meeting the war on drugs in 2017. Also, at the end of the day, we have to remember that at one point they said there's not a lot of concrete evidence to support that the war on drugs has disproportionately affected black and brown minds. However, we know that it's substantially increased imprisonment.
Point of order, Judge. Right, so there's another thing right on the flow. Excuse me if I'm right, I don't want to be any type of abusive in the room. I want to make sure it's fair. So the argument that our second point is contradictory to our counterclaim because we say that legalization is not the solution. That's a new argument. There was not any argument made in the second affirmative constructive to say that our second and third condition extension are contradictory. That argument was made.
All right, in these last 2 seconds, I